Nancy, how are you? Welcome to MMM.
Well, it's my favorite day of
It's
the month.
hump day.
Well, and Fed Chairman Powell had a press conference. How does
That's
it
right.
get any better than that?
Um, it really can't because it's days like this that you and I just go, God, why do we even have jobs? There's nothing going on.
It was, I couldn't listen, so I was reading the transcript. I'm not sure which is more painful, but all I heard or read was tariffs. Yeah, tariffs. Well, we're worried about tariffs. We need more info on tariffs. We're a long ways off on this. Get it. I don't get it, but that's what he's
Yeah.
talking about, Arthur.
Well, it seems like that's all that he's talking about. The last couple meetings, it's been this fear, this kind of constant fear that the tariffs are going to pass through really large inflationary spikes. And now the question is whether they're transitory or whether they're more permanently going to, cause inflation to be kind of higher than the Fed's target. And yet the numbers continue to look pretty good. I mean, yeah, inflation's still above where the Fed wants it, but to your point, Nancy, I mean, you and I were just talking about how I could make the case to cut rates. I could make the case to leave them alone. But I think cutting them is not going to really do much at least in the short run. So where's the harm?
Right. Well, and I think, we hear about this dual mandate of price stability and employment,
Yeah.
but tariffs are no more related to price stability than profligate fiscal spending was in the Biden administration. But there was not nary a mention of that during the Biden administration. So, this notion about Trump attacking the Fed's independence, I think you could make a pretty clear case that maybe the Fed is just a little bit political on its own. So anyway.
Yeah, I know. And that's the other issue is, there's this kind of constant underlying concern that the bias is now both ways. You had, the two members that dissented this time were Waller and Bowman, both. Waller was originally a Trump appointee and was reappointed under Biden, but Bowman's a Trump appointee. So you've got this fear that the Federal Reserve voting membership is kind of split. And then just this past week, we had the president show up for the first time in a long time to the Federal Reserve building to get a tour of the massive cost overruns, which he has accused the chairman implicitly of basically, financial malfeasance by not keeping track on this, and that there possibly a criminal prosecution. So, I mean, this is pretty nerve-wracking for us in the market.
That's part of my week was the hard hats. So all I could think of is because Trump towers over Powell and he's standing there in his little hard hat and his little diminutive body. And all I could think of was Michael Dukakis with poking his head out of the tank with his helmet on. And that was the end of his presidential campaign.
I think they should have worn a GoPro. I can see it now. Trump's like, what's going on here? Well, that's the new bathroom. That's where we put the gold-plated toilets.
All right. Introduce our guest, because I got to get out of here a little bit early.
Yeah.
Oh, he's not ready?
Hold on a second. Yeah, we're going to have a guest today, and I think we have a little bit of problem getting in. Let me just double check. I got an email.
Well, I'll talk about earnings. Microsoft reported, and they blew the numbers away. So it's up 7.5% after market. And Meta reported, same thing, blew the numbers away. It's up 8% in the after hours. So technology continues to deliver. I thought what was interesting with the GDP numbers today is that what you saw was the improvement to GDP. 3% is a good number, except most of it came from reducing imports, because remember, imports are subtracted from GDP. So the number was really kind of held up by 1 percentage point coming from the consumer, who's still spending, but slowing spending. So stay tuned. I think in a decelerating environment, economic environment, as we've said for years, you want to own the reliable growers, and that's Microsoft and Meta, and we'll get Apple and Amazon tomorrow. So, and we got Lam Research tonight, and they beat on the numbers. So they're the equipment, the chip equipment makers, and they, so they have obviously chip makers as clients, and they make the test equipment, et cetera. And so it's yeah, it's a good report, and they were up 3%. So I think he might be here. So I'll let
I was
you know.
going to say, I've been listening to some of the pundits lately and talking about how the forecast for GDP for the remainder of the year are effectively flat, they're kind of in line with trend, like 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, somewhere in that area, maybe 1.2. I think you're going to have much more likelihood of an upside surprise on GDP. And the reason I believe that is, everybody talks about the tariffs. We've heard about tariffs ad nauseum. But we just cut another deal with the EU, which was, by the way, a very big deal to getting that done and out of the way. That's like a third of global trade that we just knocked out in a pre-golf meeting in Scotland between the president and the head of the EU. But these things, they don't just turn on like a dime and go, and that's how and all of a sudden prices are higher. These things haven't been negotiated. They haven't been finalized. It takes a while from going, yeah, this is the deal we cut. Now we have to implement it. Just like a tax increase, by the way, it's very hard to make them retroactive. You usually have to make them something that happens in the next fiscal year or calendar year. It's just too difficult to implement. So the effects of tariffs might take a while to actually get into the system. And I think GDP and the consumer and business has been waiting to see what's going to happen.
But listen to this. So we have a client who's, as you know, is a small manufacturer in the Midwest, and he uses steel. And so he said that his supplier used to be 80% Canadian steel, 20%. Now they're 60-40. He's seen no price increases in steel, despite the tariffs on Canada and steel in particular. And he raised prices 12% in January in anticipation. And he said his margins have never been better. So, I know he said they're dangerously high. So I think this is one of the things that we're going to continue to see. Some of the countries are eating the tariffs. I mean, they're like the ever vanishing tariff. Who's paying for it? So it's some of the countries, some of the companies, and then some prices will go up, but it'll be a one-time price increase. And that's what you've said from the beginning. And I think, but the chairman's still waiting. He's still waiting to see what's going to happen.
There's also, Nancy, to your point, there's a lot of carve-outs.
Yeah.
It's not like just 15% on everything or whatever it is, 30%, whatever the number is. There's all of these carve-outs. So it's not as simple as 15% on steel, 25% on steel. There's chip carve-outs, there's ag carve-outs, there's all these things are still happening. So the effective rates overall are probably quite a bit lower than what people think the actual rate talk is. So
yeah. No, that's right. It's going to be fun. We're hearing from companies that, they've been able to navigate pretty effectively. The consumer companies are having some problems. And I think that's one of the things that, I'm a little bit concerned about is if the consumer which was 1% of the 3% in GDP growth, if they slow down too much, we have problems. And, we're still seeing very shaky housing market. Rents have come down, but it's, new home sales, the only reason they're even happening is because of the home builders buying down the mortgages. So one of our holdings is DR Horton, and they bought mortgages down to 3.99% on an FHA mortgage. Wow. And they said their margins are still above 20% on new homes. And they said they aren't having any trouble finding labor. So a lot of conflicting data out there.
The robots. I think hey, Nancy, our guest is ready.
Okay, let's go. Good.
So I don't know if you guys want to bring Chris in. So this is an interesting guest. Chris Semenuk from TEMA ETFs runs the Electrification ETF. It's an actively managed strategy. And I've been using it in our dynamic U.S. inflation portfolio as a little alpha generator, mostly because of the conversation I've been having Nancy about kind of where the infrastructure and electricity and all this data AI centers, which obviously gobble up huge amounts of power. And so I discovered this great little ETF, and I thought I'd get our guest today to be Chris and talk a little bit about what he's doing, what he sees, thematic issues, whatever we want to pepper him with question-wise. So, but I think, Chris, are you on?
Well, and his ticker is Volt, VOLT.
Yeah, VOLT, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we've got audio only with Chris. Maybe not.
Yeah, so this is one of our investing themes, as you know, Arthur. We've talked about it. The build out of the infrastructure for the electrification demands that are coming from AI and generative AI compute. And so this chart, I'm sure, is one that Chris sent us, but it shows that the demand is going to be up almost 50% by 2040. And I don't know if you've ever, been on the grid in Lake Tahoe, but electricity goes out pretty frequently in the snow and sometimes in the summer, just for fun to make sure we're all paying attention. So it's a problem. The grid is a problem, and we're furiously building to try to be able to, meet those demands as a country, and to store clean energy, which is the Tesla trade I've talked about. That is one of the fastest growing parts of their business. It's also very small, but is electric utility grade battery.
Hey, Chris, you there?
Hello.
Hey, Chris, we can hear you. Can you hear us? Technology, don't you love it?
I love it. I don't know how to use it, but I know how to make money on it.
I think a lot of the questions I'm going to ask Chris, because when we get him on, is about infrastructure, old versus new themes. Like, one of the things that I was concerned about is this transition from coal, natural gas. We've got nuclear coming on fast. But how long does that transition take? What are the costs associated with it? How quick can it actually happen and be implemented? Nancy, I think we talked earlier about, was it Microsoft that was trying to actually commission a nuclear reactor just to power one of their facilities?
Yeah, and the small modular reactors. And then, all of them have tried, the hyperscalers have tried to, either connect directly to a utility nearby, build their data centers around those utilities, and or start their own. And I don't think that's far-fetched. I mean, one of the things, you'll interrupt me when he's ready, right? But one of the things that that I was talking about this weekend with my son was this bunch of his Navy pilot buddies who have gotten out went to fly for Federal Express, and Federal Express has been without a contract for 4 years. Why? Because guess who's taken all the business from them? Amazon. So they've got their own fleet of planes and trucks and independent delivery people. And FedEx, is those delivery guys are all independent. So they sub-advise, if you will, or subcontract to FedEx. So there's a lot of things that are going to be changing in the economy. UPS just reported horrible earnings, and they had that big, huge, contract, the union contract, where all in UPS drivers are going to make $175,000 a year. So I told you I applied. I did not get selected, but it was pretty attractive for me. I couldn't hop up in the truck fast enough in those brown shorts and wear my platform shoes. So so anyway, it's going to be interesting. Traditional electric utilities are changing. One of the largest holdings in Chris's ETF is NextEra Energy, which we also happen to own. So the world, it's a changing. Times they are a changing, said my buddy Bob Dylan.
We talk about the Wemos and Tesla's most recent taxi, driverless taxi, but you talk about that in the context of UPS, FedEx, Amazon effectively being a major competitor to those two for distribution. Start thinking about driverless cars and that whole business model of delivering goods. We've seen, I think, a couple of situations where you see these little robot machines, but I mean, they're not very big and they can't go very far. Wait till we get air power too, like planes, these things flying over your house, giant drones, and dropping these things in your front porch.
Well, Deere is already making autonomous tractors. So,
oh, wow, really?
Yeah, and they're the farmer is able to stand wherever, anywhere inside, and direct the autonomous tractor. It's pretty darn cool. So there's a lot going on in this new age. So
sorry, Nancy, I'm gonna check. Hey, Chris, can you hear us?
Hi, everyone.
Hey, great.
Oh, good.
I can. I can't. Yep. No, I think we're all fine. So fire away. We can talk about anything you want to, especially electrification.
I think the first question we really have is, so you've got this electrification ETF that you run. And what's your kind of overlying theme? Like, how do you see the world from the standpoint of how you're building the ETF, the fund, and where do you really see currently the opportunity set?
Yeah. So, electrification is a theme that is one of a handful of themes that we focus on at Tema. And we focus on it because, number one, it's what we feel is a very durable theme. So in a nutshell, the investment opportunity in electrification stems from a simple supply-demand imbalance. And we are experiencing a tidal wave of demand after seeing virtually no investment into either generation or transmission for the past 3 decades. And any investment that was made, any capital investment that was made on the supply side, whether it be generation, transmission, or distribution, that was all replacement. It wasn't to modernize or add to the grid. So we essentially have a demand. We've essentially had no demand for electricity, no demand growth for almost 3 decades, no capital investment into our electricity infrastructure as a result of the fact that there really wasn't any growth in demand. And now, overnight, we literally have load growth, so demand for power, demand for electricity, growing at a 2.5% clip on an annual basis going forward. So, what we see here is, as I said, bringing this sort of supply and infrastructure investment back into balance again with the current steep inflection in demand is where the investment opportunity resides. We categorize the theme into 3 lanes. The first one is companies that deliver the power, so utility companies that make the equipment that generates the power. So that's sort of one lane. Number 2 is the transmission and distribution of the electricity. So that's number 2. Number 3 are all the applications and all the services that sort of are adjacent to electricity and electrification. So that's how we categorize the universe. We look for best-in-class, high-quality businesses. The portfolio consists of about 25 stocks, high-quality names that were, and this is important, these are businesses that were already having a track record of generating shareholder returns over the long term that are now being essentially transformed by the electrification trend in terms of their growth trajectory going forward. So that's kind of a commercial, if you will, of the product and how we categorize the universe, and I can take it further in detail from there.
That's great. Nancy, you want to start off the first question?
Yeah, I'm just going to ask, Chris, you got here late. I have to leave early, so this may be my only question. But this is one of our themes as well, and we own a number of your top holdings. But the one that sort of intrigued me, your largest holding is Belfuse, and I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the company and why it's your largest holding. Your second largest holding is one of our names, and we love it a lot. But this one intrigued me. So
yeah, for sure. So Belfuse is essentially in the business of protecting and connecting power. So they make connectors. So anywhere where you have one load connecting to another, and within that sort of connection, that connection has to be protected, insulated, so that frequencies don't interfere with it. So all electrical devices have connectors and have some sort of insulation around them that allows them not to interfere with other parts of the device. There's another company in their universe called Amphenol. So Amphenol is another company that makes connectors and protectors. It's a multiple the size in terms of the market cap. Amphenol trades on a multiple of like 35x forward. I stumbled across Bell because while they're in the sort of same neighborhood, they make connectors. Bell's business is sort of founded in the aerospace and defense, but they're moving into industrial and electric and into other electrical applications, if you will. So essentially, Bell is kind of like a mini Amphenol, and I can buy it for sort of a 20x handle on the PE, whereas you pay upwards of 35x for Amphenol. And this is not to say that Amphenol isn't a great business, has always been a great business, always created shareholder value, but Bell is a bit off the radar. And I will end on this, within the Volt portfolio, we're trying to basically skate where we think the puck is going to go. We're not trying to give our investors the flavor of the week. So, companies like Vistra or Constellation or nuclear stocks, they're all the flavor of the moment right now.
Right.
But those businesses are kind of ones people know. I'm hoping to identify businesses that over the longer term, the electrification trend will either shed more light on, improve valuations, or businesses, like I said, that will be transformed over the longer term. So Bell's a good example of one of those sort of off the radar names.
Yeah, and I noticed, the market caps, it's a small cap, clearly, and we just launched a mid cap strategy, and before we could even get it funded, two of the names were taken out by, they were bought. And so I suspect that's also an opportunity here. But it's interesting, great name. And I'm so sorry I have to leave, but I'll leave it to Arthur to. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. I've been watching Volt for a long time. So
no, thank you for having me on. Being on.
Yeah, no. So Arthur will take it from here.
I guess, Chris, one of the questions I had for you as a follow-up, and by the way, I'm not a stock guy. That's why I keep Nancy around, because she keeps me honest. Among other things, where does a traditional utility fit in the electrification? A lot of them, at least my view of traditional like utilities, these are generators, is they tend to be very heavily regulated. Government intrusion on the business model is pretty intense. And so, are you looking at any of the kind of more traditional utilities, or are there new ones popping up that are trying to fill the gap? That are much more nimble and can supply power to this growing consumer base?
Yes. So for sure, utilities are a way to invest in the electrification trend. One can invest, as you said, both in regulated as well as merchant power, unregulated utilities. I have looked very carefully at a lot of the utility businesses around the U.S. I think, Constellation, Talon, Vistra, these are the merchant power companies. So for anyone who's listening that, maybe is not super familiar with the utility sector, these are merchant power companies. So they basically don't have customers, if you will. They basically sell power to the highest bidder, and they'll deliver it anywhere in the country. These stocks, such as Constellation, have done extremely well this year to date, and as well as last year, because power prices, have escalated significantly, and Constellation, as a provider of power to anyone right now, can almost name their price because there just simply isn't enough. Now, a name like Constellation goes hand in hand with a very high multiple. So the stock trades on a sort of 35 handle multiple going forward. We're getting up into NVIDIA type multiples here for a utility company. Now, look, Constellation is a very well-run company, led by a very dynamic CEO. They also have nuclear exposure. So you're essentially paying for the growth that they're experiencing right now, because power prices are high. Now, the other side of the equation is to buy regulated utilities. Now, regulated utilities have their returns capped by the regulator, and regulated utilities are different from unregulated in that they have customers. So this would be like Edison or Nextera or Entergy, companies that they're just like Constellation. They have generation, but they have retail customers. Now, they sell at kind of high teens to 20 multiple. The thing is, our utility exposure, I feel like at the moment, Constellation is kind of like an umbrella salesman in New York selling umbrellas when we're having a downpour. So electricity prices are through the roof. They have available power. They can power you up right now. A regulated utility, however, as I said, has their returns capped, but the multiples are lower. Now, they're still going to get data center customers. Our utility exposure is in rural parts of the country where power prices are generally lower, but those are places where industrial customers and data center customers are looking to locate. If you're a data center customer right now, look, you don't really want to go to Constellation because they're going to charge you the highest price possible because they can, essentially. As I said, we're looking for the future opportunity where we feel valuations can get even higher, and that's in the regulated space. Companies, data center customers will go to places like Oklahoma. They will go to places like Indiana. They will go out to the Northwest where power prices on average are lower, where there is available land that is cheaper to set up a factory or a data center. So our utility exposure is about 40% of the fund, and it's primarily regulated utilities where valuations are lower, but I think those valuations will continue to increase over time as people realize that a merchant power utility isn't the only game in town. So sorry, that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but
It's okay.
That's where the opportunity right now in electrification is, in the regulated utility space, in my mind.
And like outside of I think the more obvious narratives around huge increase in power consumption, AI, we talk about NVIDIA, we talk about all the data centers that are supporting, large language models, or we call it, artificial intelligence, and everything that has to go around, as well as massive increases in supply and demand for chip fabrication. Nancy's, our offices in Scottsdale, Arizona, has the huge, I think, TSMC plant that's going to be built there. And Chris, you're on now, so thank you.
Great.
Outside of the kind of those more obvious avenues of increased demand, where else is there anywhere that people wouldn't naturally think about a big increases demand with regard to power supply or transmission?
Yeah, Arthur, that's a great question. And I think this is one thing that I really find myself having to remind investors of when they do look at the theme is AI is just one of four major drivers of demand for power right now. It's an important one, and I would say it's approximately 20 to 25% of the incremental growth now that's happening in demand. There are three other important ones. Then I would say as important as AI is industrialization. So manufacturing is being encouraged here in the US. It was encouraged by the Democrats. It's now being encouraged by the Republicans. They got there through different ways of encouraging it. So the Democrats essentially wrote a big check, and the Republicans are using tariffs. Either way, the US is reindustrializing, and you can't set up manufacturing in the US and be solely reliant like you used to be able to on fossil fuels. So you have to use electrification and automation. So there are some companies in the that sort of supply equipment in the factory and manufacturing space that believe while fossil fuels represent 80% of the sort of cost of energy, the cost of fuel for a factory, and 20% electricity right now, in 15 years' time, there is the thought that will flip-flop. So electrification will be sort of 80% of the fuel, if you will, that runs a factory, and fossil will only be 20. So industrialization of the US is going to be a massive demand driver for power. Beyond that, the third one is transportation, and then essentially the electrification of everything. So data centers, industrialization, transport, and mobility and IoT, those are really the four main drivers. I would encourage investors not to get too over their heads in terms of exposure in the AI space. It's an important driver. I feel like valuations are certainly not as reasonable as they used to be, to understate it in a certain way. So within our portfolio, like I said, we're an actively managed portfolio, and I think as an actively managed portfolio, one of our jobs is to make sure we don't expose our investors to overvaluations. And I think that there are parts of the AI and data space, parts of the merchant power space, like, as I said, I talked about already, those businesses have gotten enormous multiples attached to them now. And I think they're I think it's important to kind of have a balance of exposures when you look at electrification. That's why at the moment we've chosen to, weight more towards regulated utility and less towards merchant. And our electrical equipment exposure in the fund is geared more towards the grid and less towards the data center.
Got it. Well, I'm going to throw one last. I don't want to. I thank you for your time, by the way, and sorry for the technical problems getting on. But this, I think it was this morning or last night, Lee Zeldin, who's the head of the EPA, just announced a major change, at least from a public policy standpoint, about this kind of underpinning of like how the regulatory regime has been put together. I think it's since, was it 2007 or 2005, and it's really been one of the main kind of like least constraints on the development of a lot of this type of activity. Have you looked at what type of impact that's going to have on either your portfolio or just really in general the electrification landscape? Is it going to accelerate this process, make it easier, cheaper? I mean, how do you look at something like that?
Yeah, I think so I think the current supply demand situation in power right now is in many ways untenable. There is just so much demand, and supply from a generation standpoint is one issue. So if you put in an order for a turbine right now, it doesn't even start getting built until 2029. Okay, so that's one issue. As far as transmission distribution, the grid, as I said, our grid is on average about 30 years old, and the shelf life for a transformer, for example, is about 25 to 27. So we're already, we're past the shelf life of grid capability right now, or in terms of modernizing it. It hasn't been modernizing in a long time. When you throw in things like we just talked about, when you add in other hurdles, whether it be permitting, environmental issues, it just makes the supply situation harder. So a transmission distribution project takes anywhere from sort of 5 to 8 years to be completed. 80% of the projects in the just transmit, 80% of the projects where someone has requested a connection to the grid, as I said, those are 5 to 7 year wait times, and 80% of those requests end up falling by the wayside, either because interest rates get too high and the projects fail to get funded properly, or electricity prices get too high and they sort of back out of the project altogether. There are just a number of hurdles. Now, I think the current administration, whether it's due to permitting, so we've heard Trump talk about permitting nuclear access to federal parklands. That's one area. Recently, we heard that some of the hyperscalers are interested in buying, like Cleveland Cliffs have a number of old, obsolete steel sites around the country. Those steel sites are vacant. They're essentially empty pieces of property with large structures on them, but they are connected to the grid still. So if you're a data center company and you need power and you want to get power right away, they're talking to people who own old steel facilities. I guess the notion is they would knock down the facility, put up the data center, and the power is already connected to the property.
Here comes Cleveland.
We're in a desperate now. But I would encourage, as I said, investors, whether you invest in it through our product or whether you invest in it on your own. The utilities are a way to kind of play the theme. That is a very long tail, a very long tail opportunity, because investments that utilities make are generally done over a sort of 5 to 10 year period. Equipment is the more closer in opportunity. So whether it's something like Eaton, or Nancy mentioned Belfuse or Amphenol, these are all products that can be sold right now. The companies are generating revenue right now, and in that camp, I would encourage investors to look into the grid, because, as I said, we won't achieve a supply-demand balance for, I think, at least a couple of decades going forward. Look, it took us 30 years to essentially ignore the grid we have. It'll take a couple of decades for us to kind of put it back in shape again. And I think there are a number of things that need to kind of fall into place. And as you said, whether it's environmental policy, permitting policy, there are a lot of obstacles. and I think, if look, all you have to do is look at I don't know who pays the utility bill in your household, but any of your followers or subscribers should just take a look at the utility bill, and I think it's almost hard to kind of argue that prices aren't going higher, and ultimately those higher prices are going to foster more investment in the grid, more investment in power, and I think this is a very durable long-term trend going forward.
Fantastic, Chris, and thank you so much for agreeing to be with us today. I'm sorry Nancy had to run out, but I love everybody who's watching. The ticker symbol is VOLT, Volt, which is very apropos. And our guest Chris Semenuk, and from TEMA ETFs. Chris, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, and I'd be happy to come on again and spend a little bit more time with you if you find some more time.
This could be a couple-hour conversation around a couple drinks, probably too.
I will try to spare you and your listeners that kind of issue, but yeah, but I think in order to be nice to everybody, I'll try to be shorter in terms of my answers next time.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.
All right, everybody. Thank you. That was our macro micro moment for the week. Appreciate you joining us, and we will see you again next Wednesday, 5 Eastern. Have a great night.